This is Dr. Selma Bartholomew. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our community conversations with leaders. This is part 2 of our discussion on criminal justice reform. You have just enough time to grab your popcorn, to call a friend, to let them know that we are here and we are excited and looking forward to an amazing discussion with our dynamic panel members. I'm not going to stay too long on doing intros, so definitely get your popcorn. I'm Dr. Selma Bartholomew from Partner with Legacy. I'm honored and I'm wishing you and yours a wonderful holiday season. And thank you so much for making time to be a part of our discussion today on criminal justice reform. Our topic today, certainly we know we've passed the election and we're looking into the new year. But there are some challenges within and across all of our communities as we ask questions around how do we begin to eliminate violence? How do we begin to build a culture of love and support for our children, for families? And we wanted to do this discussion on criminal justice reform. Certainly we are aware of the language around defund the police, but that is not an agenda. And we want to begin to think about how do we collaborate. And more importantly, if you have never had a family member in criminal, who are part of the criminal justice system, you may not recognize how important family and community and also those working in corrections and in juvenile justice and in the prison system, how critical they all play, what a critical role they all play in supporting, transitioning, and creating opportunities. And so that is why we have chosen to do a two-part, actually a three-part discussion on criminal justice reform. So I'm going to start off, as always, to welcome our panel members. I'm going to ask them an introduction question. And if you're just joining us, please pull up a seat and call a friend and let them know that we are live, Partner with Legacy channel. So thank you so much. I have the first pleasure of introducing a gentleman who is, I'm honored to say, welcome to our first Deputy Commissioner from the Westchester Department of Corrections, Mr. Luis Molina. And I want to first begin by saying thank you so much for your service, Deputy Commissioner Molina. He is a part, in terms of being recognized, a second generation decorated veteran from the Marines. You've served in the 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marine Division, dynamic career working with the New York Police Department and reaching the rank of detective criminal investigator, worked as an undercover police officer, and now you're also now leading this charge of corrections in Westchester, the Westchester community. So we are honored to have you to be a part of this conversation today and to share your leadership and your expertise and to give us a sense of what's working and what you're using by way of innovation. So Deputy Commissioner Molina, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself to the audience. And I want to ask you, the first question is in light of the work and the expertise that you bring to the table, what does criminal justice reform mean to you? So thank you so much, and I'm going to pass it over to you.
Sure. So thank you for having me and enjoying the conversation. It's an important conversation, probably one of the most important conversations of our generation and for the next generation for our country. And, I come from a very unique, blessed place in that I've had the honor of working in the 3 main pillars of our criminal justice system, both in policing. I've worked in the district attorney's office in Brooklyn under former Ken Thompson when he was the first African-American district attorney in Brooklyn, New York, and then had the opportunity also to work in corrections, both in New York City, as well as in Westchester County in my current capacity as the first Deputy Commissioner for the Westchester County Department of Corrections. I am here to sort of share my personal viewpoint and not the viewpoint of the county. So to answer your question about sort of what does reform mean to me and what does that look like, I think for me, it means one is we need national standards, right? We have inconsistency in how we do law enforcement in general in this country, from policing to corrections, because we don't have a national standards similar to what you see in many countries in Europe when it comes to how the law enforcement officers or law enforcement departments engage with their communities, their policies, and their procedures. You know, in a place like America that has 18,000 different police departments, thousands of different jurisdictions that manage jails, state prisons, other juvenile justice systems that have secure incarceration for young offenders, there's not an inconsistency, there's an inconsistency in how those vulnerable populations are managed. The other thing is I think we need to shift back to where law enforcement is completely, should be part of the public sector, right? And we should not delegate the responsibility of law enforcement, especially in the area of corrections and incarceration, to the private sector. Because I think what ends up happening is you make decisions through the lens of capitalism and you don't make it through the lens of human rights, right? So I think we first start off by saying, I think most people in the country believe that law enforcement, even law enforcement officers, have a capacity to protect their communities. They're there to be guardians. They're not there to be warriors. But in order to do that, we need a consistent national standard that defines what the role we want our police departments to play in the thousands of communities that make up America.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So I hear, so he got us right into it. He made us understand, I don't think most people see those pillars, the police, the district attorney, and then also corrections. And then this idea of standards, right? In education, we have standards and it says it's the floor. And so we can have the floor, but then we can also go above it. But at least the sense of standards gives us a vision and a place to work towards. Thank you so much. I am honored to introduce a colleague and a dynamic educational leader, Dr. Michele Darby. And I tell people you may find as good, but you will not find better. And so Dr. Darby brings a wealth of experience as a change agent, more than 20 years, I think more like 25 years of experience and expertise, working directly with communities in the Long Island area, in the New York City, New York State community, and a real commitment to all youth, but also this idea, which we'll get to today, is also our young men and what do we need to do differently for our populations. So Dr. Darby, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to give you the chance to say hello to the audience, and I'm going to ask you the same question. What does criminal justice reform mean to you?
Hi, Dr. B, thank you. Thank you for that great introduction. I almost didn't recognize me. Thank you. I've been in education for about 25 years. I started when I was in kindergarten. So I've been in education for about 25 years. And my school now, I won't say the name, but what I call my school a traditional school in a non-traditional environment, meaning that my students are not the traditional students that you meet every day based on where we are housed. However, they are the traditional students in the issues that come to the table. So before we even talk about corrections or talk about criminal justice, I say it starts with education. Appropriate and responsive education stops my students from ever meeting DC Molina. If we start educating our students equally and fairly at the kindergarten level from K through 12, K through 16, which is college also, we stop them from getting to the criminal justice system. Many of my students tell me when we are doing our intake, I ask, what's the last grade you finished? And for the most part, most of them say 8th grade, because K through 8, sometimes they just get through the system by being nice. And teachers grade them on being nice. And by the time they get to 9th grade, the regents, New York State, we have regents, the regent stops them. So all of the deficiencies that have built up from K through 8 come home at that point. So education, and with education, I mean educating the student, the whole child, not only academically, but socio-emotionally. My school, we are built on the foundation of 50% academics and 50% socio-emotionally, and it wavers, sometimes 25, sometimes 75. Because if our students can't feel safe, if they don't have homes in which to live, if they don't have food, if they are victims of poverty and racism and every other ism, they really don't care if 4 + 4 equals 8. It means nothing to them. So if we can't address that social emotional issue, we are doing nothing with education. So my stand on this is working with a DC Molina, working with the Dr. B, working with the Malachi, so that we never get to closely work with a DC Molina. That's my stance on it. We stop and change criminal justice by providing appropriate education for all students.
Go ahead, Dr. Darby. Thank you so much. Thank you for being honest about it. And you're right. I do think people worry about jobs, but this is really about community. And so we cannot end the school to prison pipeline if we don't improve our schools. And so thank you for lending your expertise to this important conversation today. I am honored to also welcome Leader Malachi Hernandez. He is the representative on the Obama Foundation, My Brother's Keeper Alliance, representing the Boston community. Congratulations to him. He is also a graduate of Northeastern with a BA in political science, and brings them, this wealth of experience. And so you've had a chance to work around prison legal services with State Senator Nick Collins. And he is currently the Mobile Enterprise Manager for the City of Boston's Office of Economic Development. And when we talked initially, Leader Hernandez shared, he said criminal justice reform is near and dear to his heart. And so I'm honored to have you today. Thank you so much for being a part of this important conversation. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us what criminal justice means to you. And the tag on this webinar was Second Chances Matter, as we connect with the MBK work. So welcome, Leader Hernandez. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. B, for just being here. It's been an incredible honor this far. And thank you to everybody who's taken the time out of their day to watch. So far, the conversation is going well, and I'm super excited to dive right in. In response to your question, Dr. B, I would say that when I think about criminal justice reform, I'm thinking about it from, the professional lens. I'm thinking about it from the educational lens. I'm thinking about it from my personal lens and my personal experiences, right? My uncle, who has been incarcerated time and time again throughout my life, and witnessing that and going into the different facilities that he's been at, and just understanding, right, the culture. But then also, again, moving and transitioning to a law firm where I was actually employed at for a couple of months during my co-op season in college, and being able to actually speak to different inmates and understand their stories, and really be able to advocate for them, which was such a rewarding experience. But I think that we need to really go back to the drawing board on this one and really dissect and truly analyze how we got here, right? And I think that when we understand one of the root issues, right, which is how communities have lacked so much, how they've lacked so many resources for generations, then we need to really think about that. And what does that mean when a vulnerable person is then taking on actions, right, that could lead them to go into a facility? And we need to really, as the government, right, make sure that we are doing our part to really make sure that we're serving the people and serving our citizens, because that's what the position is for, and that's what it's supposed to do. Be able to advocate, be able to serve your community. When you're an elected official, that's what you're doing. So making sure that we're holding each other accountable as we're, going back to that drawing board and redesigning that path. But as DC Molina was mentioning, really making a standard. I don't think that we have this national standard, and I've seen time and time again, honestly, just like so many different voices chime into the conversation, but frequently, wanting to bring about new pilot programs, new initiatives. And we understand that those things are great, right? And I'm not gonna, disregard that effort, because it's super important, but I feel like we've grown to the space recently where we understand what works, right? Now we just have to take action. And I think that it's not until we take action that we're really gonna begin to see the results that we wish to see.
Thank you so much. So I keep hearing this idea of a national standard. And I'm so happy you mentioned Leader Hernandez, because I think sometimes we blame members of our community when we see that there's so much work to be done. We think, where are their parents? Where are we in terms of community? But it didn't just happen. This is decades and decades of not getting the resources that we need. I'm going to go back to you, Deputy Commissioner Molina. Can you share what innovations you've been implementing to really transform corrections in Westchester? And what role has community played, and how have you been able to get them involved in this important work?
Sure. So, I was very fortunate when I got to Westchester in 2018. They had a pretty strong relationship with the local communities for those that were unfortunately contributing a lot of residents that were justice involved, right? So you did have community support there. But we also needed to help the community understand what is the level of support that's needed for the individual that's formerly incarcerated, whether they find themselves in a situation as a pretrial the defendant or sentenced. So we really embarked on what I would call a real continuum of care, right? And let's treat this like a disease, right? And let's help leverage other stakeholders within government, whether that be the Department of Community Mental Health, the Department of Social Services, in addition to the community, right? Because the community on its own, while they might have passion, there's cost involved and there's systems and structures in place that you really need in order to help someone who's vulnerable. So many of the things we were very intentional in what we did as far as education, Dr. Darby hit it right in the head. All of our young students that are incarcerated have the capacity to perform well. What they lack is really the support. As you talked about with MBK, they lack the mentorship. And what we did was we made the conscious effort to tell you, especially young people, listen, we have vocational programming, but the reality is a safe serve certificate in how to serve food doesn't elevate you, doesn't provide you the social mobility that you need. So what did we do? We started a college program. We started bringing in tutors so that those that were in high school struggling could get tutoring support to do well, to sit for a Regents exam and pass it. We brought in tutors in a college program to provide for students that did well in the college program a pathway where they actually got admission into the college that was performing the courses. And with that, we needed to also increase the network of these young men and women. So when the college came to us to do this work, and it's Manhattan College in particular from the Bronx, we had it that the students, the traditional students, let's call them, from the campus, we said, look at us as like a satellite campus. Those students sat with other young men and women that happened to be incarcerated because we needed to help them see young men and women that look like them, and vice versa, to see it's these moments in times that can really change a life, right? So really focusing on education, but we also focused on education with our workforce, because what we helped our workforce to understand, if not for being fortunate to pass a civil service exam, being fortunate like myself to grow up in a two-parent household where I had my mom and dad, a lot of kids don't have that. And we opened up educational opportunities for them. Because what you also have to do is when you're trying to shift the culture of a law enforcement agency, be it policing or correction, you have to shift their mindset from purely occupational and transactional to professional, where they also have an vested interest in the advancement of a vulnerable person, because ultimately that helps enhance not only public safety, but really the economic health of the communities that these returning citizens go back to.
Thank you. So I heard several strategies there, and I love the mindset of increasing a child's network, right? Because relationships matter, and giving them access, and also letting them connect with other young people and letting them see themselves and have real role models, and the shifting of mindsets. I also think that the piece around workforce development matters, because you cannot end the school to prison pipeline without jobs. And it cannot just continue to be low skilled jobs. So if we are not paying attention in this environment right now, the entire conversation is about STEM. The conversation is about, vaccines and who's going to deliver it. And if there's 100 million people and each person gets a vaccine, let's do the math. And our children deserve to have access to those kinds of work opportunities and those supports. And also to encourage their heart, right? Because they're there and they need to be able to see opportunities and access. Dr. Darby, I want to talk to you a little bit about, can you share with the audience, how do we go about repairing and building those relationships with our students who happen to be in corrections, and also with attention to our boys and our young men? And I'll talk about the girls after, but talk to us about how do we go about it from the education perspective to build and repair those relationships?
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to something that DC Molina said about treating criminal justice like a disease. I think the same thing about education. I believe that education should be seen as a public health crisis. Education is our basis for everything we do. If we don't stop and take a look and see what we're doing to educate our youth, then we will get nowhere. So education is a public health crisis. The way we looked at Corona and we threw literally millions of dollars in man and woman force and money and time and TV time and into a virus that thankfully we're coming up on a vaccine. Once we finish that fight, let's take a step back and think, if we can throw all of that into a virus that just came about 12 months ago, why can't we throw all of that into education that's been around forever? So education, or the lack thereof, is a public health crisis on the macro level. On the micro level, the way we engage our students, and this is groundbreaking, is talk to them. Do what we are doing now, not at them. When my students enter my school, I meet every one of my students and I introduce myself. And back in the old days when we could shake hands, I shook their hands. Now we'll just do a little fist bump or elbow, and I meet them and I talk to them and I introduce myself. And then also the first thing we introduce, my staff and I, is respect and dignity. And it sounds really small, but if you have students who are coming to you who've been disrespected their entire lives, either at home, at school, outside, in stores, by social media, by regular TV, by books, by magazines, on different levels, they've been disrespected, to introduce yourself and introduce the concept of respect and dignity changes lives. Literally, the first time I remember introducing to my students the concept that we don't teach incarcerated people, we teach inmates. We don't teach inmates, we teach students. Literally, they were leaning down like this and they sat up. And I said, students, I am not in corrections. I am not in law enforcement. I'm in education. So the only people I work with are students and educators. So we treat them that way. We instill respect. So literally, by sitting next to them, I ask their permission to sit next to them. I ask, can I borrow a pencil from them? I ask if I'm going to look at something they're looking at. That's baseline. Every person deserves respect, not because of our titles, not because of DC or doctor or leader. Because we exist, we deserve respect. So introducing that to them. And then literally, we just begin a dialogue. I don't ask about how I came to. I just tell them, I'm happy that I'm meeting you here now. And I'm not happy that you're here, but I am happy that if you have to be here, you encounter my staff and I. And we start from there. We humanize their experience and we give them what schools haven't given them. And this is not an indictment against schools. Some of the students, when I meet them and I'm all excited and Dr. Darby, they get afraid because they've never met their principal until they were in trouble. But I'm going to change it. If they meet their principal before they get in trouble, maybe they won't. So we literally open up this dialogue and we talk and we discuss and we ask their opinions. And we have the freedom and the ability, thanks to the systems in which I work, to tailor their curriculum around their interest, but still keep up with the national curriculum and what we need to do. So really, it's just about building those relationships. And it's not a magic pill. It really is not, but it's a start. And if we start off at a place, then we can go together. And perseverance. We keep trying, and we keep trying and break through. So that's it. So I would say to all principals and all educators out there, take your time to talk to your students, find out who they are, find out their lived experiences, find out what makes them tick. If what makes them tick doesn't make you talk, then let it go. What makes them tick is aligned to what you're doing, then you work with it together and you can build them. I have anecdotal my students that they've actually changed in the time that they're with us. And you can see it in my data and you can see it in my anecdotals, just regular stories. They're people.
I love that. I love the fact that, she's going right in, right? Leader Hernandez, she's like, you're going to have a relationship. You're going to know our kids. You're going to respect them and you're going to put in the work. And I just love the passion, the tyrant that's in her heart, that she is letting us know that this is the work and we need people who are passionate about it. So thank you, Dr. Darby. Leader Hernandez, can you talk to us about, I know you've done so much work with the foundation around the My Brother's Brother's Keeper Alliance work, and also Second Chances. And community is an important piece. So how do we go about breaking the walls down that exist between community and the criminal justice systems and our youth, and to be able to now create change?
Well, I would want to start off by going back to what DC Molina mentioned earlier about viewing it from this capitalistic lens, right? I think that if we really and truly want to begin tearing down these walls, then we need to really dig deep into what does that mean, right? And that means pride, that means power, that means greed, money, right? And really stripping away that, right? Because that's one of the roots, right? And when we look at that, and then we're able to bring in different dialogues, right? And make sure that we're having those engaging conversations, right? Where we're creating action, creating, proposals for policies, then that's one step forward, right? But when we're in those rooms and in those dialogues, we need to make sure that voices are being heard, right? We need to make sure that, if I am a senator, right? Or if I'm a representative, that I am gonna step up and step back, right? And that's super crucial in this, community organizing in space, something that I've learned since young. But stepping up and stepping back is super important for these dialogues, and it enables other people and other voices to come present to the conversation, right? And don't look down on a young person just because, they may have been incarcerated or because they are 15. Their voice matters just as much as a 50-year-old or a 60-year-old or a 25-year-old, right? And when we really bring in all the different components and the different generations that exist in this world and create an intergenerational approach that favors all, then we're going to be able to finally break down some walls.
I so agree. I do think where the challenge or the gap might be is also leadership, because we see our young people every day in our communities, and we may not know how to engage them, right? We might, that idea on the last webinar, we had Destiny Hamilton from Life Camp, and she said, stop bad-mouthing our youth. And that's just a way of maybe the adults saying, hey, I need to see you doing better at certain things. And we may not know how, and I think we make the assumptions that because you're an adult, that you know how to talk to children and that you know how to engage with children. And I do think we have to now invest in actually teaching and engaging adults and children together.
For sure, and I want to chime in on that. It's super important that we do that, right? Because we're noticing a lot of young leaders actually stepping forward into the movement, right? And recognizing that they have power within their voice and that their voice is valuable. And really not only like for example, I'm going to speak of City Councilor Julia Mejia here in the city of Boston. One thing that I admire about her is that she always, time and time again, enables different young voices to be heard. And I'm not talking about, just somebody like me who's 22-year-old. I'm talking about a 15-year-old, right? And she's sitting down with them, like understanding their life, like the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And when she steps forward into the conversation, she's saying, here is a young person, right, that needs the support, that needs the guidance, right? But how can I, in my position, teach those around me, right, what that young person is going through or how to work with them? And I definitely agree with you. We definitely need more of that. But then we also need to push young people to make sure that they're voting, because that's super important as well. And understanding that, there are people who are running for public office, and public office is one component into this entire thing. And we need to make sure that they're getting out to vote, but then also pushing, as many other generations as well to go out and vote as well, because that's a huge component in all of this.
Thank you. I'm going to let Deputy Commissioner Molina jump in here. I want to go to the issue of second chances. And I say that because I don't necessarily, it certainly is connected to opportunity, but you're working, Deputy Commissioner Molina, in corrections, and you've shared this, you've had this rich career working with the police department, working with the district attorney's office. So I think you probably would have a more unique perspective as to the power of second chances.
Sure.
And how do we go about creating them? Because for some children, we might think it's just a program. And so I'm curious to hear, what do you, how do you define it, and how do we go about capitalizing on that opportunity for our young people?
Yeah, so I think part of the challenge is with second chances is that first, as it relates to leadership, we have to give chances and opportunities for people that look like us to be in positions of either law enforcement commissioners or law enforcement chiefs of police or chiefs of law enforcement. Because part of the challenge is that 90% of those positions are represented by one gender and one group of people, right? And they're not really represented by us. So even past Black and brown skin color, they don't have any of the shared experiences that we have growing up. I myself grew up in the South Bronx. I have both my parents, but we grew up very poor. I have family members that have been justice involved, have been in the incarcerated system. So it helps to inform my decision making. So until, like Leader Hernandez says, voting is important, but holding the people we put in office is important too, because many of them are the ones who are appointing individuals into these positions. And we don't have any real diversity, equity, and inclusion at the top of these positions that are really defining policies and procedures that impact the communities, right? So when you think about how to have real impact, that impact is defined by people's experiences, because these individuals have significant discretionary governance powers, right? More power than an actual elected official. So when we think about second chances, when the leaderships of those organizations help for the larger public to understand that individuals should not be defined by the mistakes that they made, and how do we move forward with that? It's those individuals that bridge those opportunity gaps that exist, right? In job opportunities to know someone, on how to help someone fill out a college application, right? How to have network effect like we do in the private sector for individuals to create opportunities for themselves. You can't uplift yourself, right? You need others to pull you up. You need shoulders to stand on. But young men and women, especially minorities, Black and brown communities, need to see individuals that look like them into these positions so that they're not outliers, right? The fact that if I would have told you 30 years ago, there's only a handful or a dozen or so Black or brown individuals that are CEOs of Fortune 100 companies, who would have thought that 30 years later, that number has gone down? It has not gone up, right? Because there's not a concerted effort to make sure that there's real diversity in those positions. And in government, whether it's law enforcement or social services, they become more critical, because then you know how to help integrate the challenges that we're faced with today.
I so appreciate that. So I hear policy, and I also hear this idea of diversity, true diversity in leadership. As I think second chances, I think what I'm disturbed about in this current climate in the New York area and across our communities, as a result of COVID, certainly they were like, okay, we've got to release people from the prisons, right? And from the criminal justice system because of the virus. And so somebody might say, oh yeah, they're giving this person a second chance, they're releasing them. But they've had so many suicides. We see the crime rate is up. That's not really giving a person a second chance. Yes, I don't want them in prison.
Sure.
But if you release me and I don't have a job, I don't have any income, I don't have a support system around me, and and you know that it's also amidst of a pandemic, and you've put nothing else by way of a safety net in place for me, yeah, I'm going to become depressed. If I was suicidal before, I'm going to become even more suicidal, because now I have the weight of I'm home, I'm free, and I can't provide for my family. I can't buy Pampers. I can't do some basic things. And so I want us to really think about what is a second chance, and how do we make it a viable second chance for a young person or any person who's been part of the criminal justice system to truly create opportunity and access and love, right? To say that I love you enough and I want you to be a part of this community so you to do well and for not just survive, but to also thrive. And so I love the idea of policy and diversity. Dr. Darby, I see you trying to jump in there, so go ahead.
So, and all three of you said things that I've been taking note on, like a true book nerd. I've been taking notes. When we talk about second chances and we talk about policies and we talk about students, residents going back outside into society, we have to think about what are we sending them into. So we all know the common trope about when you take a drug addict, someone who's addicted to anything, you can't put them back in that neighborhood because they have the exact same experiences. The only thing that changed was that person. Now, reframe it and think about people in the criminal justice system. They came from neighborhood A, and in neighborhood A, they were surrounded by all of the social ills that exist: drugs, poverty, crime, friends who led them down the wrong path. We take them into a correctional facility. We are successful in rehabilitation. Let's say we're successful, but then we put them right back into that neighborhood. So again, they change. The neighborhood still goes on. The neighborhood is still the same place. So a couple weeks, they feel like I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And then they're back into it. So when our students and my students are going back into society, we need a multi-layered approach. Mental health. We need to ensure that we are dealing with all the mental health. And I don't just mean medication, actually don't even mean medication. Having someone support them so they can talk to someone and actually figure out, and if medication is needed, that's fine also. Mental health issues will always stop them. The continuation of education, social skills, literally social skills. If my students score 85 on every Regents or pass their HSC, formerly GED, but they don't know how to have a conversation with someone, they don't know the common social, what we call common social skills. So honestly, what I'm saying is when our students are being released, we need to have a community that envelops them when they come home. There's a social worker or a psychologist that's there to help them. There is, I'm not going to say an etiquette coach, but there's someone there who's teaching them the things that you need to know about spending money, about credit cards, about saving money, life skills. Then we need someone there who's going to help them with workforce and or education, because if we're going to continue the positive trajectory, they need to remain around those positive people. If what we do in our schools and in correctional facilities is help to rehabilitate them, then we have to do it when they go outside. Otherwise, we become a self-feeding machine. We let them out. We don't let them out. They deserve to be out. They earn the right to be out. And then they come back in, and then they go back out, and then they come back in. We need a pattern interrupt. We need to stop it. When they go back out, a community needs to surround them and envelop them. And one by one, we can do it. We're not going to change the world in one conversation or in 1 week or 1 month, but in 1 week, we can have a conversation with the student. In 1 month, we can start teaching him positive life skills. In 1 year, we can have him gainfully employed. You change one student, you literally change his life. You change a generation. You change his children's lives. You change their lives. My research topic in my dissertation was first generation college student. I am one, a lot of my friends are as well. By changing our lives through education, we have changed the lives of our children. So we have already ensured that Black and brown children at this point are going to have a change. We need the community to step up and not throw them away. A 6-month sentence is not a life sentence. It's 6 months. It's a year. I don't care if it's 10 years. It's not a life sentence. And if you don't help them change, you will be at the end result of them not changing.
Thank you, Dr. Darby. I told you this is Community Conversations with Leaders webinar series. We partner with Legacy. We keep it real, we keep it honest, and we tackle the hard issues. So I know you want to jump in here, Leader Hernandez, because this is your work around second chances. So I'm going to let you comment on second chances. And for those who are in our audience, you can share your questions. And so I do have access to them. We thank you for joining and for staying with us with this conversation and for liking and for being a part of this important conversation on criminal justice reform. So Leader Hernandez, second chances. What does it mean to you and for the young people that you work with in Boston and also with the foundation?
Well, I wanna continue as to what Dr. Darby was just saying. I mean, I think that we know, right, that like a conviction blocks access to federal student aid, which obviously, prevents you from pursuing education, right? You have um convictions that restrict you from being able to acquire housing resources and access to different housing just resources, and then that means that you could potentially face homelessness, right? There's so much that we already know, but the thing that we need to ask ourselves is, do we need to keep those barriers in place anymore? I think that we've grown, I would say, at least from my perspective, the work that I've done, I've seen that people are tired of it, right? We already know nationally, right, where people are protesting, rioting, and looting and stuff. They've grown to the space where we have said enough is enough. But in order for us to really get there, we need to make sure that we're tackling everything, those social skills, financial literacy skills, right? Promoting, right, mental wellness and spirituality and mentorship, employment, housing. There's so much that we have to do. And when it comes to the Obama Foundation, I can say that I am super proud, because the Obama Foundation, I was honestly say, has saved my life, right? There's been numerous times where I didn't feel like I could go to college because I didn't see anybody in my family prior to me, graduating high school, attend college. So I was like, okay, college is coming. And I remember being a junior in high school, college is coming in less than a year, and I'm not even prepared. I've never had conversations about college. I've never visited a campus. And because of my involvement to my community here in Boston, thanks to the Walsh administration, the President Barack Obama administration, there were opportunities that I was able to take part in that enabled me to see the world from a different perspective. And that is what changed my life, right? And then, being able to go speak at the White House, getting involved with the My Brother's Keeper initiative, understanding the different milestones, and really understanding that this is hard work, and they're acknowledging that the work is going to be hard. It's not going to happen overnight, as Dr. Darby said, but it's something that when one person changes, it changes for generations. It's going to change a community. It's going to change a city, right? Because somebody like me now, who was hesitant about what my future could look like, is actually now in a place, in a position in life where I'm considering on running for public office at some point in the future, right? And had I never been involved in these types of programs that social services offer, being exposed, right, and going into into different jails and prisons and seeing what life is like, and just understanding things from reading, really just like transformed me and turned me around 360. But I would say that when it comes to employment here in Boston, we have the Department of Youth Engagement and Employment, which hires young people over the summer and the school year, right? And that's something that I took part in when I was about 14 or 15. And that was my first job. And that's how I got involved in community organizing. And there's so many different programs that are offered to students here in the city of Boston that enable them to really learn different skills of their choice, of their interest. They get to choose what job they want to work for at the different partners that the city has, which is amazing. And you're giving power to that young person when they're only 14, 15 years old, right? And giving them money, right? Making sure that they're being rewarded for their effort of learning, right? At a young age, teaching them how to save their money, and so forth. But then, when it comes to mentorship, we have Mass Mentoring here in the city of Boston that partners with Youth Options Limited, and they're doing incredible work, right? But they're not only, just taking young people who are working and being tutored, but they're offering mentorship, right? And mentorship, as I explained earlier, is what saved my life, what guided me, what put me onto the right path of, okay, now I can be something in life. Now I know I can make it, right? Because sometimes, and speaking again from my own personal experience, some of those conversations weren't necessarily had in the household, right? I grew up with my mother, who was domestically abused by my father, right, when I was young. And then, having my stepfather, and then having to work at a young age to, survive and, pay for my own school clothes and different things like that was hard as a young person, right? But having mentors and really having those conversations that I wish I would have had in my house at a young age, but I had them at a little bit of an older age, is okay. But it's one of those things where now I can say at the age of 22, like, okay, I'm reaching back out and extending my arm and extending my hand to those who I know are in my predicament, because it doesn't have to stop with me, and it shouldn't stop with me, right? That's going to be selfish of me if I keep all that I absorbed over my years just to me, right? And now what does that look like? I'm reaching out to different people in different high schools here in Boston. I'm reaching out to my 3 younger brothers that I have here home with me, and really just shifting the narrative, right? Doing the work, exactly. And still being plugged in, right, to those higher level conversations of, Obama Foundation and the city of Boston and other, like large, just larger level dialogues and stuff. But that's what keeps me kind of serving as like the liaison between the two, because now I can see, right, what's being done and what does it look like and how can I translate that, right, for those at the bottom who need help getting up.
Thank you so much. And for those in the audience who are commenting, so I have a couple of questions from the audience, and I so appreciate that. So I hear leadership, I hear diversity in leadership, I hear standards, I hear community, I hear also mind shifting and how we engage children. I hear Dr. Darby's around education. So we have a question on the audience that says they wants to know what's the correlation between language deficiencies and incarceration, language deficiencies and incarceration. Someone wants to take that one?
Well, I wish I could understand what we mean by language deficiencies. Are we talking about cognitive abilities with regard to language deficiencies? Is the question, is a second language a language deficiency, which it's not. But if we're talking about cognitive abilities with language deficiencies, if we take it down to the micro level, without language, then students can't read, nor can they write, nor can they converse. If you have a person who can't read, write, or converse appropriately, then there goes their chances for an education. And then there's their chances for a job. So when they need money, they go out and find money. So if we're talking about language deficiencies in that sense of the word, the fact that our students do need to develop, our children do need to have language developed from a very early age. I don't know the numbers, but there's been many studies that state how students learn when they come from a quote unquote middle class environment from when they come from an environment that may be lower socioeconomic. And it's not because the will is not there. It's because in the lower socioeconomics, the families may be concentrating on working and shelter. But
Excellent.
we need to increase the language with our children. We need to not talk at them. We don't say, just wash the dishes. Can you please wash the dishes? And why should they wash the dishes? One in de-escalation, when we're talking to our children, if there's a reasonable question, give a reasonable answer. So instead of just talking at our children, have conversations with them, explain why mommy is doing this, why auntie is doing this, why the teacher or the principal. If they ask a reasonable question, why do I have to go to bed? Answer the question. So language development is integral to teaching our students, which is integral to education, which is integral to work. I will not call being a student who speaks a second language a deficiency, because it's not. It's actually a benefit. So that's not on the table at all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Darby. I'm going to put the next question from the audience to Deputy Commissioner Molina. It says, how do we begin to import families to utilize the resources from education and community to assist children in the juvenile justice system? How do we begin to import families to connect to those resources, Deputy Commissioner Molina?
Yeah, so we do a lot of work with connecting, especially with our young people and their families. And we have families that call us all the time about the challenges that they're faced with their child that's justice involved. And for me, a child is anybody under the age of 24, right? A 21-year-old is not a full-grown adult with brain development still ongoing that makes sensible decisions. So we work with families to understand their challenges and issues and the support that they need. You know, one example of that, we had a young woman whose mother called us to say we want to help with her discharge planning, and we want to actually set this person up to live in another county. And I knew that this other county really didn't have the resources that this young lady needed, in order to sort of continue her care that she was getting with us to deal with her substance abuse issues. And we helped the family understand that. Sometimes, you know, moving the problem doesn't solve the problem, right? And that's at its most simplest form. But we often welcome not only families to talk with us, but we also use other sort of representatives, faith-based leaders, right? Other community leaders that families of these individuals can feel more comfortable going to, and use them as ambassadors to help us make these linkages, to help the families connect whatever mental health, medical health support that they need, education help that they need, so that they can help support the young people that are in their lives that are justice involved. But the other thing that we do is we make sure to celebrate the accomplishments of individuals. For example, when we have a high school graduation, whether they're passing a GED or getting a traditional high school diploma, we have a graduation. We invite the parents. If a parent tells us, I can't afford to get to the jail, we send a car to pick them up, to bring them to the jail. We take photos, right? Because these rites of passages need to be witnessed by the people that care about them. And that's part of that process of getting them integrated into this person's life to help them.
I so appreciate that. And for those who are watching, thank you so much for staying with us, Community Conversations with Leaders. Make sure you like and subscribe. Dr. B and the Partner with Legacy team, we appreciate you connecting with us. I also think there's a shifting in the mindset as well. There is this constant thread of where are their parents? Where are their parents? And every mother and every family always wants the best for their child. They may not know how to advocate for it. They may not know how to author it in their system. And when they themselves are dealing with stress. So we have to really focus on relationships and helping people to feel empowered. And I think we also have to go back over some grassroots leaders. We no longer have building associations. We don't have block associations. We don't have community associations. We do have churches, and they do a phenomenal job of certainly being there. And we saw that in COVID-19, that they are, were initially left out of being testing centers and things like that. But we have to now train members of our community to be leaders and to engage our young people. I'm mindful of the time, but I have another question from the audience, which I'm going to give to Leader Hernandez, Malachi. Someone wants you to talk about trauma and the effect of trauma and incarceration, and how does this affect future life outcomes? And is there any strategies that you have found that may work in terms of intervening? So trauma and its effect on future life outcomes.
That's a phenomenal question to whoever asked it. I wish I had their name. I would start off with saying that trauma is something that is super, I'm just gonna say sad, honestly, right? It's something that we need to continue to push to the front of the conversation, right? As we're doing this work, but listen, right? I would start off by saying listening, because we need to be able to really just be able to really like assess the different, variations that exist as a result of people being incarcerated, but connect them to the resources. And if they don't exist, create them. I think that that's where we really have to start, right? And, when it comes to, as I was mentioning earlier, right, like for people not being able to access, educational opportunities or housing opportunities, that emits trauma in and of itself, right? Because then they're going to reflect and say that they're not worthy enough, right? And when they think that they're not worthy enough, then that's a whole other problem, right? And we really have to be mindful as to how we're treating them inside, right? And what type of access are they getting to on the inside, right? And as I was doing some research recently and talking to a great friend of mine who's actually at UC Berkeley right now pursuing her master's, she had informed me that there is a company in, I believe it's in New York, California, if I'm not mistaken, by the name of Grid Alternatives is what it is. Grid Alternatives. And what they do is they are a Solar Corps fellowship program, and they connect people who are incarcerated to job opportunities, right? And they're doing that by going into the facility, conducting a 12-week training program and getting them access to what currently is life outside of the facilities, right? And when we think about how these programs for inmates really develop real world skills, we need to make sure that, whatever trauma they're facing, they can push past that, right? Providing the resources of therapy, of spirituality, right? And encouraging them that they are worthy enough to be back in this real world. So that way, when they're in these types of environments upon, their departure, right? We're making sure that they are really prepared, right? And that even includes communication, because we want to make sure that they are prepared enough to tackle what the world has to offer, honestly.
Thank you so much. I also think that there's a mindset in our communities where this idea of kind of like pick yourself up and just keep moving forward, like you don't get to sit in your pain because of all of the things that we've experienced historically. And do we truly believe that people have, deep issues around it, and we don't necessarily talk about suicide, and we don't talk about
Right,
depression.
right.
And
That's something that happens a lot, especially with people like, I mean, when I was working at prisoners legal services, I remember speaking to some of the prisoners inside of there. Not going to mention any names, of course, but they were sharing with me some of their thought process inside of it. And I remember there was one individual, I shared with him immediately that my name was Malachi, right? That's like, of course, I'm gonna introduce myself and stuff. And he shared with me that his son was named Malachi. And funny enough, we both have family from the same part of Puerto Rico. And it was just very interesting to see him light up when he heard my name Malachi, and him be reminded of his son, right? And by the end of the conversation, we were laughing and smiling and stuff. And it just gave him fresh air, right? Another breather, another reminder that he is worth something. And I remember him telling me, like, thank you so much for having a conversation with me, because as much as there was work related to it, it was a lot of like, you actually took the time out to listen to me, and you took the time to show that you care, right? Because he said, like, I don't feel like I matter in here, and that struck a chord with me. And when I remember like hearing that, and I was like, dang, like, what could I do more, right, to people who are inside, to let them feel that they are loved, right? Because that's one of the things that inside and outside is something that we're experiencing. There's a lack of love in communities everywhere, and we need to really, really, jump on board with learning how to love, right, and displaying that, more, because it's not enough of what we're doing. Like, what we're doing now is just not enough, right? And like, let's make it normal for Black man and Black man to hug each other in the middle of the street, right? Saying, brother, I got you. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm here to cry, if you need a shoulder to cry on and stuff like that. And just all these different, just different ways that really normalize and kind of sets a standard for what should be, I'd say.
I so appreciate that. And I'm mindful of the time. For those who are staying with us, thank you so much for being with us. We're coming to a close. Before I ask the last question, I want to invite people. This is actually a series that we've been doing this month. We did part 1, which is still available on the channel, which we had last week with Dr. Hewen, Mr. Jerome Innes, and leader Destiny Hamilton. On Thursday, I want to invite everyone. We're having an author, Richard Bell, and he has a new book out called Stolen, 5 Free Boys Kidnapped into Slavery and Their Astonishing Odyssey Home. And he is also a criminal justice reform expert. So we're going to continue the conversation this week. We're also passionate about it, and I so appreciate it, because I think what your passion is one thing, as DC Molina pointed us to, but we also have to be strategic, and we have to offer solutions. And so I want to kind of get to this final question around courage and the honesty that it will take. And I've got 3 minutes before 5, and I'm still Dr. B, so I can decide when we end officially, okay? So for those who are watching us, I don't worry about time. My team knows that it's energy that matters most, and we are bringing you the energy that you need in order to sustain yourself. So energy-wise, I'm gonna start with Dr. Darby. And to answer this final question, if we are to change and truly reform criminal justice, it takes courage and honesty to do what? So courage and honesty, Dr. Darby, what will we have to be courageous about over the next 4 years?
It takes courage and honesty to do something. We can sit around and admire this problem forever. We can talk about how bad things are, how bad things are going to be. Yes, fine. Digest that. We're good with that. Now, what are we going to do? My staff always knows, anyone who's ever been in a meeting with me, I never leave a meeting without action steps. What are our next steps? So to everyone listening, here are some quick next steps you can do. Mentorship. Whatever it is that you do, you can reach out to a child or a student or a formerly incarcerated person to teach them. Plumbing, construction, if you're a lawyer, a doctor, if you're a housewife, you can teach someone how to cook, how to do what you do in your home. So mentorship, and it doesn't take a program. It takes, there's a school around the corner from you. There's a niece or nephew that you can call right now and say, hey, I know you like how I paint. How can I help you do this? I know how you want to learn how to cook. Another thing, advocacy. Advocacy, speak up and stand out, do something. If you see something is wrong, say something and do something. A third way, policies and procedures. Join your local organizations, have a voice. Your voice on a text to your friend is nice, but where does that go next?
Go ahead.
Join policies and procedures. Speak up, vote. Tell the lawmakers what you need and what you want. Margaret Mead, I think, who said that one person can't change the world, but in fact, that's the only thing that can. You can actually step up. So 3 steps you can do right now. You know what I'm going to tell you to do? Look up your local congressman, look up your local council person, look up your local leader and contact them.
She's bringing it. She's bringing it.
If you can go online and complain about the service that you had at McDonald's, then you can do the same thing about the services that are not coming to your neighborhood. It doesn't take that much. If you're watching us, that means you have access to a computer. Use it. Those are the small steps. Maybe Dr. B will have another show about the bigger steps, but right now it's within your power. If when you get off of this call, this Zoom, this YouTube, you contact your local leader and express at least one thing that's bothered you. One thing that has been bothering you in your community, that's a start. 2, contact a young person that you know right now and ask them, can I spend some time with you and teach you something? Or can I spend some time with you and you teach me something? Develop that relationship. And lastly, advocate. When you see something, say something. And it's not just for terrorism.
Go ahead, Dr. Darby. Did she bring it?
That's how we do it, Brooklyn.
Table. She left nothing on the table, for us. I'm going to do Leader Hernandez, and then I'm going to do Deputy Commissioner Molina. So Leader Hernandez, tell us, it will take courage over the next 4 years to do what?
I would say that what we really, really, really need to do is to start, right? And when I think about, starting, for me, that very similar to Dr. Darby, I would say get informed. One, education is key in this movement, and really being, aware of, what the history has shown us, what the data has shown us, where are we going in the future with this? But then secondly, really just learning your voice, right? And again, tying back to what Dr. Darby was saying about advocacy, learning your voice is super, super crucial and imperative, because we need everybody in this type of dialogue, right? We need people to step forward, to step up, show out, to really get involved. And then the last thing is just to get connected, and again, mentorship. Because without mentorship, without relationship building, without networking, this is nothing, right? How are we supposed to all be aligned, but then we're not communicating to one another about how we're truly feeling and how it affects us and how it affects us, those around us, right? We need to make sure that we're really holding each other's hands in this and really stepping forward together, because it's not just about us. It's about those who don't have that voice, right? Those who are incarcerated, those who don't have that voting privilege, right? Those who are being discriminated time and time and time and time again. But how do we stop it? We have to start.
Thank you so much, Leader Hernandez. Thank you for your voice and for those excellent next steps. Deputy Commissioner Molina, thank you again for your service, and tell us, what do we have to be courageous about over the next 4 years?
Yeah, I think, if I was speaking to our national elected leaders in this country, from our president to our members of our legislature and Congress, what we need is the courage to really look at, like what Leader Hernandez says, is how we got here. We need a truth and reconciliation process in this country when it comes to criminal justice and policing. We always want to just jump to healing and feeling sorry for ourselves, but we have not processed what you talked about, that trauma. And we have transferred these adverse experiences from one generation to another. And I'm constantly asked, well, how do we stop the next generation from repeating this? We save this generation, right? Because this generation has gone through a lot. It's created a lot of victims throughout the system. But until we as a nation have a real truth and reconciliation process about criminal justice in this country, it's hard to see the future changing. And 20 years from now, there's going to be another Dr. B having a show, and we're going to be having the same conversation all over again. And I don't want that. I'd like the future generations to solve a different set of problems than we've been solving for the last 100 years.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our audience. I so appreciate it. Thank you to each of our panel members for your voice, for your leadership. I'm wishing you, your family, a wonderful holidays. For those who are listening, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you staying with us on behalf of the entire Partner with Legacy team. For me, it takes the courage to put your money where your mouth is. It is time that we put an investment back into our community. And yes, to truly give those in corrections what they need by way of resources to truly create that opportunity. And then also within our community, I want to give a special shout out to an organization. You can look them up. It's called Uplift Communities. And they do a lot of engagement pieces with young people and planning and engaging community. And so for Julius Karanda and his partner at Chimboro, we need organizations like that, and we need to be funding them to do the work and to engage. And I think we're going to have the courage to just love each other again. I don't think that we truly know what that is. I think people want whatever it is that they're seeking by way of, you give me something, but love is unconditional. And we have to love our young people, and we have to love each other again and want to get to know each other. So I thank you so much for those who are joining us again. This has been Community Conversations with Leaders. Our calendar for December, join us this coming Thursday, December 10th, which is my sister's birthday. Happy birthday to her. We have Dr. Richard Bell. He'll be talking about his new book, Stolen: 5 Free Boys Kidnapped into Slavery and Their Astonishing Odyssey Home. And join us on December 16th for our virtual holiday celebration. So bring your favorite beverage. And we have a renowned poet, Cynthia Amoa, and we'll be also recognizing our young people and our young scholars during that event. So thank you so much for joining us. And please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And it will be available anytime. You can share it with your colleagues and with your network for those who are joining. Have a lovely evening, happy holidays, and a wonderful and prosperous new year.